battle is unfolding between PETRONAS BERHAD and DWZ Industries JOHOR BERHAD, along with another party, of allegations of environmental contamination. The case has garnered significant attention as it revolves around claims of negligence and strict liability involving industrial operations in Johor. PETRONAS BERHAD, the plaintiff in this case, asserts that DWZ Industries, the defendant, caused industrial effluent to be discharged onto their property. According to the claims, the discharge led to severe contamination and damage to the plaintiff's land, sparking questions about accountability in industrial practices. DWZ Industries Johor BERHAD operates a factory providing surface finishing services for metal parts used in the electronic industry. The operations include a wide range of cleaning, washing, and electroplating services for contract manufacturers. The plaintiff's legal team alleges that the factory's activities breach a duty of care owed to PETRONAS BERHAD. At the heart of the case is whether DWZ Industries and the second defendant can be held liable under the principles of negligence or strict liability. PETRONAS BERHAD's legal team argues that negligence stems from the defendant's failure to take reasonable precautions to prevent harm. Alternatively, the strict liability claim suggests that DWZ Industries' operation involving activities with inherent environmental risk make them fully accountable for the contamination regardless of fault. We'll continue to follow this story closely as it develops. For now, back to Angkasa Puri.
Thank you, Yang Arif. My client, PETRONAS BERHAD, seeks justice for the significant contamination and damage to their land due to the discharge of effluent from the defendant's factory. So, DWZ Industries BERHAD operates a facility that engages in hazardous industrial activities such as washing, cleaning, and electroplating services for metal parts. These activities involve the handling of harmful substances, yet the defendants have failed to implement proper containment measures. This negligence resulted in the escape of effluent, which contaminated my client's land. Under the principle of negligence, the defendants owed a duty of care to ensure that there will be no foreseeable harm to the neighboring properties. Hence, by failing to contain the effluent adequately, they have breached this duty, leading to direct harm to my client. Moreover, Your Honor, we also invoke the principle of strict liability. Given the hazardous nature of the defendant's activities, liability will be applied regardless of their intent. Industrial operations of this kind inherently carry significant risk, and defendant must be held accountable for resulting harm. So my client has suffered material damage to their property, and we respectfully request this court to rule in their favor, awarding damages and imposing injunction to prevent future contamination.
Thank you, Yang Arif. The defendants categorically deny these allegations and assert that they have complied fully with all regulatory standards governing industrial effluent discharge. The operations of my client's factory are conducted with strict adherence to best practices and safety protocols. We dispute the plaintiff's claim of negligence and argue that there is no conclusive evidence, as subjected to evidence 1, directly linking the alleged contamination and PETRONAS BERHAD's property to our factory's activities. Furthermore, Yang Arif, even if contamination did occur, it was neither foreseeable nor the result of any negligence on my client's part. The principle of strict liability, as argued by the plaintiff, again does not apply here as our operations are lawful and properly managed. We maintain that this case lacks sufficient merit and respectfully request the court to dismiss the claims against my client. Thank you very much, Yang Arif.
Hi Madiha, to help you better understand strict liability, let's refer to the recent case of PETRONAS BERHAD and DWZ Industries BERHAD. In this case, we will discuss a few key issues. The first one is whether the defendants owe duty of care to plaintiff. The second one is whether there was breach of duty of care, and the third one is whether the defendants' conduct are liable under the rule of strict liability. In this case, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, holding both defendants liable for negligence and strict liability. However, the court did reject one of the plaintiff's claim, which is the cost for land clearing, as there was no evidence that such work had been done. Now that we have covered the issues and decisions in this case, let's delve deeper into the ratio decidendi, or the legal reasoning behind the court's judgment. In this case, the court uses the principle of negligence. What is negligence? Negligence means failing to do something a reasonable person would do, or doing something a reasonable person would not do. So to establish negligence, three elements must be fulfilled: duty of care, breach of duty of care, and damage. So the first element is duty of care. Duty of care is the legal obligation to act in ways that would avoid cause harm to others. In Donohue and Stevenson, the neighborhood principle established that we owe a duty to care to those who are closely and directly affected by our actions. And in this case, the proximity of the defendant's factory to the plaintiff's land established a clear duty of care. The Caparo test further clarifies duty of care by adding three conditions: foreseeability, proximity of relationship between the parties, and whether it is just, fair, and reasonable to impose liability on the defendant. So for foreseeability, it was foreseeable that discharging acidic effluent could harm the plaintiff's property. And the second condition is proximity of relationship. A close relationship had existed between the defendant's factory and the plaintiff's land. And the third condition, which in this case, it is just, fair, and reasonable to impose liability on the defendant, as imposing liability will protect both parties and the environment. So the second element is breach of duty of care. So once a duty is established, it must be upheld, and the failure to meet the required standard will result in a breach. In Clerk and Linsell case, it was stated that if harm is foreseeable, the defendant must take reasonable steps to prevent it. Here, the defendants breached their duty by failing to take adequate precautions to prevent the discharge of highly acidic effluent onto the plaintiff's land, causing damage. So the second principle used in this case by the court was strict liability. Established in Rylance and Fletcher, strict liability was defined as holding individuals responsible for any consequences because of hazardous activities without any fault or negligence. There must be three necessary elements required to establish strict liability. The first one is the non-natural use of land, then escape of a hazardous thing, and lastly, the foreseeability of damage by the defendant. In this case, the defendants improperly stored the harmful industrial waste and releasing it onto nearby land, violating all the elements of strict liability, which held them accountable.
Oh my god, Damya, I cannot believe you would go through such effort to make a video for me to understand. But I guess since you have already gone that far, I'm just going to make a feedback video to show you what I understood from your video. So let me reiterate the facts of the case. The plaintiff, PETRONAS Gas BERHAD, specializes in gas separation, transportation, and distribution, right? And the defendants, the DWZ Industries and its parent company, provide metal finishing services. And the dispute arose when highly acidic industrial effluent from the defendant's factory leaked onto the plaintiff's land through an illegal bypass, and that corrodes the gas pipeline and causing significant damage to the plaintiff's land, right? So, I guess from this PETRONAS Gas Sdn Bhd and DWZ Industries Johor Sdn Bhd and another case, it is a pivotal case in Malaysian tort law because it focuses on negligence and strict liability, which are crucial concepts in holding businesses accountable for environmental harm. And it's also significant because it clarifies the obligations of companies handling hazardous materials and the extent of liability under Malaysian law. Other than the case you have stated, I think other related cases and principles that we can extract is the Transco PLC and Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council, in which it clarified the principles of strict liability, emphasizing the importance of non-natural use of land and the foreseeability of harm. There's also another case, Cambridge Water Company Limited and Eastern Countries Ladder. It clarified that foreseeability of harm is essential in strict liability cases. So I guess this case underscores the critical need for businesses to ensure proper management of hazardous materials. Failure to do so can result in severe environmental harm and substantial legal consequences. This case reinforces the legal principle that companies must take reasonable steps to prevent foreseeable harm to neighboring properties as established in Donohue Stevenson. And additionally, the application of strict liability in this case is consistent with Rylance and Fletcher. It emphasizes that businesses can be held accountable for damage caused by hazardous substances escaping from their land to other partisans even without direct negligence. So by holding DWZ industries accountable, the court not only provided justice for the plaintiff, but I think it also set a significant precedent for corporate responsibility in environmental protection. Ultimately, this case highlights the balance between industrial activities and public safety. It urges stricter compliance with environmental laws to prevent harm and promote sustainability. And I guess that's all. What an interesting case.